conversation about Maria Souza Hogan's new memoir, Samba of Survival, My Light Within, as well as to hear from Bernardo de Castro, a Woodbury resident who has been teaching for 21 years. And what Maria and Bernardo have in common is they both come from Brazil, both educators, and I know both of them. And this combination kind of came about organically. Bernardo and I used to be neighbors here in Woodbury, and when I would be out for a walk, he'd be out walking the dog or out with the kids, and we would have conversations about education that were just spontaneous and exciting and a lot of fun. And our daughter Adela was took art lessons with your wife for the longest time, and she would come back with these ethereal, amazing watercolors coming through the woods with her pictures. It was an ideal life, it really was. And I met Maria because we worked together at Litchfield High School, and I read this book early on in a previous iteration. Maria has worked faithfully on her story for many, many years and working it to a level of perfection that you have every reason to be proud of, you know. And it's been an education to read this book, to learn about Brazil, and to understand struggle in a way that I could not have without this book. I think even our toughest, hardest days in Connecticut, USA, can't compare to some of the trials that you described growing up in Brazil, in poverty and with hunger. And so it occurred to me a conversation with two people from Brazil who became educators in Connecticut and the west of the river, right? To have that conversation about what it means to be from someplace else and be here would be an interesting conversation. So to prepare for this and to introduce everybody, we had a couple Zoom calls. And what was just fascinating to sort of be steeped in their conversation, kind of as an observer in a way, it just took off. And it was just fascinating to me to see two people from two different experiences of Brazil have such interestingly similar experiences here in the United States, that there were some threads that were just very, very similar, and it was fascinating. So that was kind of where all of this came from for this conversation. And when I was talking to Maria about how this would look today in the library, we talked about setting it up as a conversation, so that's why the unusual arrangement of the chairs in a circle instead of a rows, not a lecture but a conversation. So Maria and Bernardo can share their thoughts and experiences, and you guys can jump in at any time you want with a question or an observation, just to kind of broaden our understanding and our knowledge together. So thank you both for being here this afternoon. It's pretty awesome.
And thank you for doing so much work, organizing everything.
No bother at all. Oh, I gotta tell you though, panic attack. I printed off a story that a certain elected official in 2021 said tens of thousands of Brazilian immigrants wearing designer clothes and Gucci bags are heading for Connecticut. And that wasn't what I was looking for. I was looking for the discussion questions. But this idea that people are coming to take our stuff is something that I think people from other places are forever contending with as human beings who aren't recognized as human beings when they get here. And so for just as a starter, why don't we look at where Brazil is in the world and the size of it? And would you guys just kind of introduce where you come from and what your world looked like? There we go. You want to show us, Maria? Sure.
Okay, so I come from, I am here. This area here is called northeastern Brazil. And I was born in a town here called Castro, the name of a poet in Brazil, abolitionist, and he was against slavery, and the town acquired his name. He's dead now. So I migrated from a town in here called Castro to Salvador. Salvador was the first capital of Brazil, built in 1530 by the slaves. By the slaves, because Brazil had a very long history of slavery. So if you look at this area here, and if you picture in your head Africa, West Africa, it's somewhere around here. So it was almost like a straight line to Salvador. Salvador is very pretty, very beautiful beaches, pretty women, many churches as the influence of the Catholic Church, 365 churches, so you can go to a different church each day of the year. And that's it, very historical, very African influence, very strong in African influence. Foods, clothing, the way we dress, the way we talk, the way we dance, the way we capoeira, the way we express ourselves.
Maria dances all day at school. She does. Maria is a dancer.
Okay, and that leads us to the title of the book. You know, the samba is an African dance that came from West Africa via the slave trade and centered right here in this area of Brazil, in the state of Bahia. This is the state of Bahia. And so the dance is very expressive, but my samba, my dance, was a different dance. I never learned how to dance the samba, although it's intrinsic of Brazil, of my culture, because my dance was the survival. That's why I called the book Samba of Survival, because I had to survive, and that's it. Okay, Bernardo, sorry.
No.
Where you come from. Any
Yeah,
question? I'm sorry.
I'm from Rio.
I'm from Minas Gerais.
Oh, cool. So you're from this one here, this state, and it's bordered with Bahia. Yeah, so Rio was the second capital after Salvador, and we also had a lot of the slave trade go here. Portuguese, they continued slave trading much later than other countries in the world. And so the influx of African people to Brazil is like 10 times what came to the U.S.
Wow.
And we have a much more African representation in culture and everything. But we do also have this huge chasm that Maria's talking about. And I'm on the privileged side of that chasm in Rio, and I grew up in Ipanema. And so you can see it's interesting that Sandy picked this pairing, because it is like, I was very fortunate to be in this, very special spot, and very, story and music came from there and all this. And Nascimento Silva is like the street that I was growing up in, and it's like where these poets were, and we were composing music, bossa nova. And, but you can, if you grow up in Rio, you're always in front of the chasm. You're never far, you're never insulated. I think Connecticut is much more able to create this buffer between privilege and lack of, but in Brazil you're always almost in direct contact, and what happens often is that you develop sort of desensitizing, because you see poverty as you go to the beach. You're seeing people that live in the street and that spend the night there, and so you come. And as a kid, you feel something very uncomfortable about it. But as you grow up, you develop these mechanisms that you can explain that away, or feel like that's okay somehow. So
Bernardo, in one of our conversations, you were describing kind of the geography
Yeah.
in a way that, so whereas
Right.
wealthy people in this geography are used to being up on the hill, it's the other way around, right? So
Yes,
that's part
the
of this-
Portuguese, they valued, when they came into these cities, they valued the low-lying areas where it was easy to build, and they won't only build fortresses on the top areas for having these strategic kind of points, but then the low areas were more valued, and the invasions, right, that we call them, the informal or irregular kind of settlement that would happen on the hills became the favela. And often these are more dangerous because when there's a lot of rains, there's a lot of landslides, and there's a lot of death. But they do get the most beautiful views of the cities at the same time. It's a very strange kind of contradiction. But like if you go up a favela, you will see Rio in a dazzling kind of way at the same time. So.
Could you speak to that some more, Maria, about what it was like to be in a favela while I put the picture up?
Sure.
Oh, so Bernardo's talking about coming from a privileged environment. Let's hear what it was like from that side. Yeah. Oh, there it is. Oh, sorry. Too quick.
That was it, the favela one. You have the one.
There we go.
That's it. Okay, I look at this picture now. I showed it to my students. I teach at Litchfield High School. And one student said, but it's kind of cute. Those little houses there. And I look at it again, and I said, well, it is kind of cute. They're all together, snuggled together. But if you live there, it's not cute. It's not pretty. It had no electricity, no running water, no sanitation whatsoever. And it was basically inside the ocean, in the ocean. So there was people like my family. I told you that my family came from the interior of the state, right? From this town, a small town called Castro. So my father had died and left my mother with 10 children to raise. And, well, she had 14 children, and 4 had died. And when my father passed away and the kids, my brothers kind of grew up and could not support the family anymore, they wanted possibilities, so they left this small town and came to Salvador, and we ended up in this slum. We called it at the time invasão, which is invasion, an invasion, this strip of land basically inside the ocean with, as I said, no electricity, no running water, nothing like that. And so my house was not that one there, but it was very similar to that cute one there up front. And the bad part was that at the end of the summer in the tropics, March, at the end of the summer in the tropics, and the water level, the ocean level is high. There is actually, it's singing songs and stuff like that. So the waves would come real up high and boom onto the roofs of those homes and would invade it. So the women would go and get the pots and pans floating on the ground and clean it up, and the mattresses, and put it outside, because Brazil is a tropical country. Of course, the sun would come back and shine again hot, and that everything was fine, put it back again until the next wave came. So it wasn't pretty. And in addition to that, the ocean, because it was no sanitation, all the bad stuff went in there. So
washed out to sea?
Washed out to sea until the waves, the high waves came and brought it away. So it might look like pretty now, like my students said, but romantic a little bit, but living there, no way.
Maria, how did your mother support that many kids after your dad passed away? How does a person do that?
How did she do that? My mother had only a second grade education. She was married at the age of 14. My father was 24 years old. He was a widower and pursued his 12-year-old until he got her. And they got married at the age of 14, and she kept having children every year. She had a child, and she begged. She used to send me and my brother Eduardo. He's not alive any longer. So my brother Eduardo and I would go and knock at doors with my mother's little note. I remember one actually. I have here Orlando Lima. Orlando, my son. My children and I have not eaten for days. Anything you send us would be helpful for beans, rice, and farina. So I would approach Orlando and give him the note, and he would just get some money put in my hands, and my brother would walk home. Sometimes I would go to Orlando and he would see us coming. He would not even bother reading my mother's notes. He just would come and put some money in our hands. And I have something here in my book about Orlando. May I read it to you?
Oh, please do.
I just love Orlando so much because to me he represents humanity, and I don't know what my mother would have done without Orlando. Okay, so here's my mother's note. Orlando, my son, we haven't eaten for days. If you could send us a little help for coffee, beans, and farina, God will protect you and deliver you from all evil in this world. Mother would write. I remember Orlando always sent us home with some money. Sometimes he would not even bother reading the notes I handed him. I didn't read them either. Mother always said the same thing. When Orlando saw us approach, he would automatically reach to his pocket. Mother, okay, and here is one later. Much later in 1997, when Orlando Lima was sick with cancer and died, people came from near and far on mules and horses on a flatbed truck. They walked under the baking sun, dusty and dirty, to pay their respects to Orlando. The residents of Castro Alves had never seen so many people at anyone's funeral before. Not even for the mayor, the judge, a famous doctor, or any other politician at any time. In my dreams, I follow Orlando Lima's procession. I bring him a white Sempre Viva chuveirinho, a plant common in the area. I dig a hole in his grave and plant the Sempre Viva. I would like it to spread and create a big carpet, alive forever, like the goodness and humanity Orlando carried in his heart. I get emotional when I read this because I picture this human being as the utmost human person I have met in my life, besides my partner, Bruce. Any reaction? Any question that would like to ask?
What happened after he passed away to the community?
To the community? That's a good question. There wasn't anybody like Orlando Lima. He would treat anybody who would appear at his pharmacy. It could be a belly full of tapeworm or anything, a cat or anything. He would treat them.
Maria, earlier when you were talking about your mom at 14 meeting your father, was that really common in the area that you were in northeastern Brazil, where females would be under 16 and get married? And was there any law in Brazil around your area that you had to be a certain age to get married?
Good question, Bruce. It was very common, and it still is. You know why? Poverty. Due to poverty. The women don't find that there is no other way out. In my own family, one of my sisters, Gaia, she, after my father died, she was 18, and she went with a friend to spend some time in a small town. There, she met a farmer, and the farmer promised her put food on the table every day to eat. Of course, she got pregnant, and he disappeared, and my mother had to raise the child. So it's very common, and it's due mostly to poverty. If you have resources, of course you can't, right? You don't want to, you pursue an education.
Yeah, your sister Wa, at 12 she met Laureate.
My sister.
Wa.
Uwa.
Uwa.
Oh, Uwa. Uwa is another sister. Lucia is her name. We call her Uwa. She was one of the eldest. She got married, I don't remember precisely the age she was, but she got married a little later because she had like a sweetheart, a boyfriend from the very beginning. She was 12 years old when she started dating, but my father was against it, and she got married later. And when my father died, they waited until my father died.
Bernardo, in Rio, in a different socioeconomic context, are people getting married? Yeah, are women? Do they have more opportunity for choice in their growing up? Or?
I mean, my mom got married, I think she was 19. So it was different. I think the expectation that a girl would have, it's still Latin, sort of Catholic, have that thing of like the quinceañera, right? So when you're 15, 16 is when you were shown to society, sort of thing. And then they would have these, but the expectation is that they would get married and have kids and stay at home. So there was that kind of traditional framework there. But I have the same sense as Maria that in poverty there was much less options, and it was very common to see young girls either get married or get pregnant, right? So there's a social economic was a huge factor.
Maria, in your memoir, there are other people who are touchstones in your life for their kindness and for their modeling. And I know it's not something that you wear on your sleeve, but you are Dr. Maria Hogan, and you have a PhD, and you were in that situation where it would seem your options would be very limited as well. Can you speak to what happened in your life that you had a broader vision for yourself and that you preserved yourself in a way that allowed you to go to the light?
How do I answer that? Okay, I think mostly the nuns helped me quite a lot, and there were other women in my life that helped me quite a bit, feeding me. But I think the point in which I actually started learning it was when the invasão, the shanty town that you saw the picture there with the ocean in the backyard. That's where I lived. In front of it, there was a highway, a very dangerous highway. So when I arrived in Salvador from this small town, in Castro, I wanted to go to school. In that small town, Castro, I liked studying, I liked learning. I had a little bit of some brain there, and it was me. It was the person who I was, and I still am. I haven't finished learning yet, and I tell myself God isn't actually finished with me yet. But so I started tutoring in that small town. I didn't have books. I didn't have pencil, paper, absolutely nothing. So I borrowed books from my classmates, And I started teaching them when they had like difficulty with diagramming sentences. And so they let me borrow their books. And when I arrived in Salvador, and I was in this shanty town, in this slum, wondering if I were able to go to school again, because I did not know. I was 15 years old. And one day I was lying down in front of those houses in, like sitting down there, and I heard a loudspeaker announcing the start of a new school across the highway. And so I said, entered the house and I said, Mother, I heard there is a new school beginning on the other side of the highway. I want to follow the car and get a flyer and see if I could get to school. And she said, well, I'll come with you. My mother was stocky and she had veins, varicose all over her legs, and she couldn't walk very well. And so, but she took my hand, and she and I crossed the highway, and I got a flyer. The next day I went and wanted to be tested. And it was a school started by the nuns, the French nuns. And they tested me, and magically I passed the test, and they gave me a scholarship. And in that school, I started learning, and I liked it. I liked learning. And the nun used words like one gives what one has, like teaching. One gives what one has. Or be simple, like the Father in heaven is simple. Your body is the temple of God. Preserve your body. Those kinds of saying and teaching. She taught us one book in French, The Little Prince, Le Petit Prince. And one sentence that I remember, let's see, the essential is invisible to the eye. So I kept those saying in my brain, and I wanted to continue studying. So that woman was very important in my life. And there were other women in my life who were very important. There was one lady called Tidinha, Dona Tidinha. Dona Tidinha lived in that shanty town. On the side there was a walkway to the beach. And when I started school, and I walked with my books to study there at the beach on the rocks, because the house didn't smell good. So I wanted to go there. And when she saw me going by, she would say, Leda. They called me Leda, Leda. That's my middle name. It's a Greek name. It means happy. So, come here. Have you eaten today, Leda? And I said, no, Dona Tidinha. She said, come quickly. So she would get me in and close the doors, close the windows, and would say, don't tell anybody that I fed you today, because if they come looking for food, I don't have any. I would not know what to do, and I would feel bad not to feed them. So she fed me, and I think, Dona Tidinha, I'm not a poet. Please be patient with me. The poet is here. Do you mind if I read it?
Please do.
Dona Tidinha, I wrote a little poem. I said, Dona Tidinha, I remember under the shining sun, by the silver waves, bathing the warm sand under a blue sky, I sat at your table by your silence, eating a banana and bread, killing the hunger, filling the soul, forever grateful. That was Dona Tidinha. And there were other women too in my life. There were the women, the mothers of the students I tutored. So the nuns, when I was at that school, and they saw that I learned, so they started giving me students to tutor. And I started tutoring, and that's how I made it throughout college. And still helped my mother a little bit.
So back at the house, your mom was she still taking care of your other siblings while you were at school? What did things look like for
Okay.
her when you were away?
Okay, so when we lived there, I had 6 brothers and 3 sisters, and with me there were 10, right? So my brothers, it was a big city, and they kind of spread out. The family was kind of united in this small town. When we arrived in the city, in the big city, it got spread out, divided. There was no connection anymore because it was a survival. Everyone was trying to survive. So my mother, as I said, she did not know much, and I think back of my mother and I pray for her and I ask her for forgiveness because I did not understand her that well. I didn't understand her. I wanted her to do more for me. I wanted to go home and have food or books or shoes, but she didn't have it. But I kind of resented it. I was a teenager, of course, and I resented it. But she was a very peaceful person, very religious, you know. The will of God was with her all the time, and it is, how are you today, mother? I am okay, my daughter. It's the will of God. God wants it. God. When I think back and I said, you know, mother, maybe you could do something. You could have done something, but she could not. You know, she gave what she had, and I forgive her. So she stayed home. She cooked when she could, or she had something, but she rested quite a bit because she was kind of sick and didn't have much energy after. You can tell after giving birth to so many with very little to eat. I can't imagine any soul having much energy.
See, professional athletes or professional entertainers have like good days and bad days. How are you able to keep your concentration and focus while being desperately hungry all the time and at the same time having no margin for error because your job was to basically tutor all those students when you're feeling, you know, incredibly miserable? How are you able to maintain that focus?
Good question. I honestly think that it was just me. There was something in me that propelled me to stay, to teach, because I didn't really like living there. The smell bothered me. I didn't even want to bathe in there. I bathed in the ocean. And so my skin would be full of spots from the salt, and they called me gata pintada. Gata pintada is spotted cat because I had these little spots from the ocean because I didn't like it. I didn't like bathing there. My spirit is kind of a little, not a little, but very open. I like nature. I like the outdoors. Bruce can attest to that. So I kept my attention, my focus on tutoring when I was hungry. I think inside of me, I had to. There was no way out. You know, when you have to, you do it. You do it when you have to do it, right?
There's a part in your book, you know, it's really interesting when you're still in Castro and you are learning how to read. It's like when you started going to school and you discover these books and you would either borrow from your classmates at the time, or I think someone let you borrow first you had the story of the chicken that wanted to make corn bread or corn cake. And so she's inviting, and then, you know, there's the verses, and you would repeat, after you read and you understood the story and you memorized it, you would repeat to your siblings several times. You would try to tell them the story. And I find that that's very interesting that you had this curiosity and literature already got to you in a different way in which you wanted to teach, you wanted to have this be repeated. Then you had Ugly Duckling, I think was the next one. And you would also tell everybody the story several times. So early on, I think you had some signs that you appreciated that part of learning and reading verses and things like that, which was interesting. And I wonder if your siblings had the taste that you got for it. I remember that early on in the book you say how your grandmother would hold you before she passed, and she had this really special feeling for you, that she didn't want you to be on the floor, and she had something like that she treasured about you that your mother told you later. So there's interesting things that happen around you that kind of created this mindset that seems different, right?
Right. I think I was telling Bruce another day, maybe this morning or at breakfast, I told him it was a breached birth when I was born, and I thought to myself, I was born walking because my feet came first. I think it was the teacher, Amy.
Yeah.
Like a natural kind of organic teacher. I just like teaching. I think, born to teach.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a sister like that too. She liked to sit everybody and give them homework when they came back from school.
Well, can I say something? Seems to me you were born with a sense of purpose and possibility, but you just couldn't verbalize it. You knew there was more for you, you just couldn't name it. And that, the thought, the dream of something different, better and bigger, kept you going. I mean, nowadays they write books, but you lived it. There was a sense of purpose, survival that led you, but you just couldn't put your finger on it. You were born breech, I was too. And they said that's where you're stubborn, you know, you do things differently. You know, so my parents would always say, you just have to do it differently. So, you know, there's something special about people who are born breech. You survive that birth, you survive it.
You survive anything, right? Definitely. Yeah, lots of things in my life I couldn't verbalize.
That's right.
I didn't. I didn't have support at home, you know.
And if you verbalize, they would make fun of you.
Exactly.
Who do you think you are? But you knew there was that drive, the future moving forward, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And I was quiet and introspective, but stubborn too. When if I wanted something, I get it, and Bruce can attest to that. And discipline, kind of. You know, I have an innate discipline.
What's your way out?
Yeah. To cross that highway, it was awful. The highway in front of that shanty town. Many people from the shanty town got killed. Even crippled people got killed. And comparing the two cultures, the United States and where I grew up, I'm not saying that the whole Brazil is like that, but it's significant that Bruce and I were driving for a walk, for hiking at Penwood Park near West Hartford, where I live, and suddenly the cars stopped. Everyone stopped, and I said, "What's going on?" So there was a deer crossing the road, and the deer, the female, the doe, right? She crossed, and the baby deer could not cross, stayed on the other side. Do you know that traffic stopped, and one woman got out of her car and went and got the baby deer, carried it in here to the mother. And I went, oh my gosh, you know, what a difference. In Brazil, we don't stop pedestrians that much.
I hear you saying this because for me, I'm living here now for 3 years. I'm from Brazil, so I like to go for walks too. And when I go for walk, I like try to go this way. And when the car's coming, the cars really do a big turn, and I'm like, thank you. Wow! And if it's one car, they all do a long turn. It's really different, like really kind.
Yeah. It makes you feel human, right?
Yes.
Just like I had a sister-in-law. living with me, and I took her for a walk, and there was the crosswalk. And when she puts her foot on the crosswalk, the car stopped. And she said, "He stopped for me? Oh my gosh, he stopped for me." and then walked, like, oh my gosh. Yeah, that's a difference in culture.
Marie, the more you talk about that highway, the more I think about your mom and the pain she had to be in when she crossed that highway with you to get to that education. And I think that image is going to stay with me. The risk and the pain and the sense of purpose for you as well. And I've lived outside of the United States, but I was always free to come and go, and it's a very different situation than when people choose to leave one culture for another. And would it be okay to kind of shift gears and just talk about that a little
Sure.
bit? And immigration is a big hot topic in an election year. But I also think hearing you talk so deeply about hunger, and I think hunger is a character in your story. It is the villain
Yeah,
and the foil, but understanding that what a driving force that is for you and your sense of your own integrity and your right to be there and be human and feel human in every way. Could you both just talk about what is that like for a human being to live a place, even, in these conditions? In your book, you talk about how there is a community there and the people are looking out for each other. And when you talk about getting food as a family, when your siblings would get food, that you shared it, that it wasn't competitive, but it was for the good of the group. So to leave that nurturing that you did have, and those good and kind people who supported you, and to leave this one culture for another, and just to hear about it from your two perspectives, would that be really, really, I think, beneficial too.
I think that, I work a lot with immigrants arriving to Denver because I'm a school teacher, 8th grade, and so we have always new ESL kids, because Denver is sort of a hub that gets a lot of Brazilians, a lot of Dominicans, a lot of Ecuadorians. This is a huge mixture of cultures, and it's interesting to see what's a shared experience of the immigrant is this. You feel like you're lost in translation often. You feel like you're not. It's misunderstood, some things, and then some things you just. It takes a while for you to realize certain tacit rules that we have, because we have these conventions that we've stopped talking about it in a culture, and we never verbalize them. And when you get to a new place and you start bumping into them, is when you start seeing, oh, this is a rule here. And so there's a lot of invisible things that you sort of, find your way around.
Give an example.
Yeah.
Give an example.
Oh, the volume of your voice, and the way you express yourself when you're excited about an idea, often can be misread here as you're angry. So I tend to be loud. My mother was super loud, and so people would pass by our room when they were talking. They thought they were fighting in our family. So when you get here and you're just having a conversation and you're expressing passionately about something, someone might read that as anger, and you're not. And then you're like, wait, I'm not angry. No, it's not. So there's a lot of non-verbal things that go in that kind of realm. And I think immigrants and kids, they learn very quickly to have these code. They switch more easily than adults. I came here and I was 25. Maria, how old were you when you?
Don't ask me.
No, when you came.
No, I came after I finished college in Brazil. I did finish college in Brazil, hungry, but I did. I was 24. I came to stay with the family, American and Brazilian,
That's
and then
right.
I went back. And 82 is when I actually came back.
Yeah, yeah. And by 82, then, yeah, I was like 26, so I'm more or less similar experience.
Okay, if I can add to
Yeah,
that, so more examples, space, for instance, our idea of space. We, Latin Americans, we like being close together. I remember being in Arlington, Virginia. I was an au pair there. I lived with a family. And the first time I rode the bus in the United States, there was a person sitting in the back, and I sat right close to that person. And she laughed, she sat in the Or in the elevator, I entered the elevator close to someone, boom, move out. You know, the space is very, in the touch, you know, I have to hold my hands because sometimes, especially teaching, when they do a good job and I want to say, oh, you did a very good job. Oh, honey, that your hair is so pretty. I can't. My principal has called me a couple of times. You know, keep your hands to yourself, Maria. Like a teenager, like a kindergarten. You know, and my son, I have a son, Paul. He was 2 years old. And he was in Brazil, took him to Brazil. And in Brazil, everybody kisses and hugs. And he came back to school here. He was in a nursery school. And he was hugging and kissing everybody. And the teacher said, hey, Maria, tell Paul. So it was difficult telling Paul, you said children and the barriers.
That's right.
And there are many barriers, cultural. You can learn the language, you know, you can speak with an accent, you are not perfect, you can write, you are not perfect. But talking about culture, it's a lifelong learning experience. It takes forever.
Yeah.
I'm still learning, and there are stuff that I ask Bruce. Bruce helps me, you know. Sometimes I do help him too.
Yeah, there's this image that is helpful where cultural differences are sort of like an iceberg. And what we see at the surface is the way that people dress, their preference for food, words, languages. And then if you look under the surface, every understanding that you carry from a culture, like what is happiness, what is the role of women and man, what is spirituality, all these things, they have different perspectives that you carry, and as you're going into a new culture, that's not going to be explained because people are not aware of how much they're carrying. That's this baggage, that's sort of subconscious almost. And so you have to, as an immigrant, that's a lot of adaptation and assimilation is assimilating this kind of invisible set of conventions and rules that are here.
It's true, but those are challenges, but there are possibilities. The possibilities, you know, like my life now, it's so different. I am very thankful for what I have. I'm very thankful for what I have accomplished. And even having a pair of shoes, putting shoes in my foot. Oh my goodness, I have shoes, or going in my closet, I can wear more than one set of clothes, and I can take care of myself and go to the dentist and see a doctor. Those things I didn't have it. Growing up my whole life in Brazil, having a car, being able to go and fill the tank, I mean, wow. Very thankful for that. Very, very, very. And my spirit is to help those who have less. So, teaching in the classroom, and when I go back to Brazil, or anyone who comes on my path.
It's a great question for you, for both. The sense of community that you guys experience in Brazil, and just knowing that many Brazilians come to Connecticut, does any of that sense of community transplant itself into Connecticut culture? Does Danbury, for example, have a strong Brazilian community where people are supportive and forming businesses together, or communities? Does that carry?
Yeah, I think that that's the reason why Danbury is such a hub, is because there's all these networks of friendship and family, right?
I have my aunt who
Yeah,
lives there. My uncle, he lives there. Yes.
yeah, right. Are you from Governador Valadares?
Yes.
Right. So 90% of the Brazilians that I know are from the area around Governador Valadares. I don't know what it is about that town, but I just asked straight away. It's beautiful because there's a community around that, so like a geographical, cultural connection that people have. You know, and then they bring religion too, so they gather around, you know, church and that kind of thing. So that can be the kids.
The area that you just specified that a lot of the immigrants from Brazil that come to Danbury, what part of the country is that? Is it a
It's
small
right
town?
between her Castro's interior Bahia
Right,
and Rio. If you put
so
a
it's the
point in the middle
northeast.
there, that's where kind of Governador Valadares is.
Okay.
Is-
Yeah, so Governador Valadares is sort of like, this is Belo Horizonte, here's Governador Valadares.
Mhm.
Here's Rio,
Uh-huh.
here's and here's Castro.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So just to flip it around, what are things that Americans you encounter could do differently or better when we encounter people from other cultures? There are ever situations where you thought, wait a second, what? You know, or is there something about American culture that could be more hospitable?
More hospitable. I think, to me, I think the people here have more a sense of justice. I think you fight more for justice than what I was used to in Brazil. Especially, well, as I said, as you know, I teach, and when if I do anything that is not fair in the classroom, oh my gosh, I will hear it big time, big time. Even if it isn't that I think it is fair, and the students think that was not fair because you didn't do that to that person there, and I said, wow. And I said, well, how come I didn't do that? They complain, and I think in general. I think the people of the United States, I think maybe because we have more here, I think more economically affluent, we have more an eye to the other, you know, like the sense of justice. Although, this is my view, I think that sometimes we are quiet, maybe in general, about the justice. We want to do it, we want to be fair, but maybe I voice it very loudly, and I think that as a community we should like voice it loudly, more loudly, the sense of fairness that we have in us. We want equality. My country is very unequal. I came from a country that is very unequal. Over here is more like middle class, and I would not have met Bernardo in Brazil because I came from that place there, and it's only here that I am able to talk to Bernardo. We are more like an equalizers. The country is more like an equalizer. What do you think?
Yeah, just since naturally I've read your book, just a couple of examples for justice would be when Maria was talking about that dangerous highway. Maria had a sister that actually got hit twice and injured just crossing that highway, and also because there was no electricity in the favelas, that there would be people that would be climbing up to install electricity, and there were times when they made a mistake and they fell down and they died and got electrocuted.
Yeah, that's, you know, the lack of infrastructure, the lack of respect for the other. I think we have more respect for the other here. Do you agree with that?
I think what you're talking is about maybe levels of law. Brazil being a place where highways are built, but no speed limit is enforced. or people turn a blind eye towards it. 90 miles an hour is just a suggestion, or the stop sign is just a suggestion. I've encountered this in travels abroad. So maybe I think that's what you're talking about. I like to think that some societies are filled with laws, town laws, county laws, state laws, federal laws. So that's my take on what you were saying. That life seems to be cheap, maybe in Brazil and in other countries, so that somebody who's hurt on the highway doesn't get any justice, doesn't get any compensation. If they survive, maybe that's the will of God. Maybe that's the attitude. So there's no one who's going to say, I saw that person was hit, and I got the license plate, and I'm going to report it. And you're going to be taken to court. Does that happen in some countries?
I also think though it's localized too. Like us living in Woodbury, Connecticut, or Connecticut has nothing to do. Even Woodbury has nothing to do with Bridgeport or the deep bayou or Texas or Tennessee or New York. I mean, I don't think I can speak for the whole of the states because I think here we're privileged in this town. There's a false sense of safety and but the truth is, I live on a road near the high school and I'm afraid to cross the road to go pick up my kid. So, come when the school lets, I stay home. I wait. And I've lived there long enough to see how it has changed over the years. So, I think yes. I mean, I come from Greece. Speed limits are a suggestion.
Yeah.
But then again, I raised teenagers, and I heard at times, like I had to tell my daughter, this is not a suggestion. Stop sign is not a suggestion. Step on it. It's like, okay, So, I hear what you say, but I think it's tough to make a generalization just because we live here.
True. That's true. I think the value of human life has to do a lot with your humanity. You are a person, and you're human. You are a temple of God.
I think, one way that you learn the mentality around colonizing Brazil and colonizing the U.S. originally is very different. The Portuguese, they wanted to come in, exploit, and take the richness back. And so that's very much rooted in the way that people think. It's like, I need to take care of myself, I need to accumulate enough, and then I want to go back to Portugal. And in the US, you have this kind of colony of people that needed to leave, and then they kind of found their place here. They see this as it. They're staying here and they just build something. Yeah. But I do think that as we get now to these moments like we have right now, it's like where if you're different and you're coming in, maybe you're not part of it. And so there is, in Connecticut, you see the question of segregation playing out. I feel like Danbury, you feel a sense of segregation. And I think these conversations are helpful just because I think people feel very afraid of the different, of the poor. All that culture seems threatening to many people. And so you can see when people make choices about schools in Danbury, that slowly a kind of segregated space sets itself up in neighborhoods. And then you set up more poverty schools and schools that are not, that are like where the parents are trying to have a certain kind of space for more privilege. And so it's a natural kind of instinct that you see. And so how do you have more conversation and then you have community kind of have a sense of wholeness that we're all the same, and how do we all want this the benefits of education to help kids, be raised. And so I think a lot of it is going to be conversation, but I do think that there's a question of segregation is happening and playing out, and Connecticut has a lot of it.
Did I not hear how old you were when you left?
When I left,
Brazil?
I had finished college in Brazil. I finished college later. I entered school late. I was 24.
24.
24.
And where did you fall in the hierarchy of births?
Of the siblings. Okay, so the seventh. After me, there are 3 boys. After my birth.
My wife, she comes from an agricultural family in Sweden. They had 12 children. And those 12 children were 6 boys and 6 girls.
Wow.
And in opposite to what you had to deal with, you didn't have any direction or any goals. They had to stay at the farm and work the farm, because if they didn't, the farm would collapse and the family would go poor. That family went on to be doctors, engineers, nurses, teachers. Incredible how that family managed to go from farmers to being real productive people in society.
Amazing. So it had an infrastructure, right? That the kids got the children could fit in and just go with the system.
Yeah,
Is
she
it
can
so?
speak more to this than I can, because I lived my life in the USA, in the Bronx. So,
You said
you wanna say anything about
Switzerland? Switzerland, you said?
Sweden?
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 Sweden, right?
Yes.
Sweden never experienced war, though.
No.
Yeah,
No, we were lucky.
yeah.
No, they didn't. I know Greece was
Yeah.
occupied by the Turks.
400 years, yeah.
Now, Maria, I know Brazil is a Catholic country. How about the churches? Don't they help? And I mean, if there are a lot of poverty, doesn't the church or do they play a role in helping people?
That's a question that's kind of hard for me to answer. There was one priest in that small town where we lived in Castro, but my sister had to sleep with him for the money.
Wow.
But I'm not generalizing, but in that small town, that's what happened. But he also gave a little bit on Wednesdays. I remember him giving a little bit of money to the family, and the money was very little. We couldn't buy beans and rice or something that would just feed us 1 or 2 days, or maybe 1 day. So the church is not that strong to give money because it doesn't have. I don't think it does have. It's not a wealthy church. It just supports itself. Is that true? Or how do you feel?
Yeah, no, it's interesting, right? Like your experience with the French nuns, it's often set up as a private schools, and then they will have something, actions for the poor, but there's nothing more organized where they were really trying to do a push. So and also what happens in Catholic church that I observed is they have sections, they have branches that are more interested in social equality, and there's a split in the church about that, where they feel like they have more of a social role, or they feel like that's just the will of God. So in Brazil you do see these variants, and so depending on what's there's some priests that are more interested in that question, and they have more of that community action going on. But often it just plays out on something sort of self-serving, where the church has a community, they have schools for the middle class, and so you see a lot of that too.
I understand the Pope's from Brazil.
Argentina. Yeah, well, I'm laughing because Argentina and Brazil have this sort of rivalry. And so, he's from Buenos Aires, but he's a lovely human being, as far as I can see, what he, the way that he speaks and he preaches about things. Brazilians are very admiring in general. I mean, Brazilians have a mystique around popes. right? When the Pope comes to Brazil, the number of Catholics increases all of a sudden tenfold. It's incredible. We'll go to the street, and then the Popemobile comes over and passes through. I remember watching as a kid John Paul, and he could speak Portuguese. So for Brazilians, that was like, but he would do 15 minutes talk, and we're all like, and he says a few words in Portuguese, and so there's a lot of mystique around the Pope in Brazil. And him being South America was like fun.
I do have a question. Looking at the map of Brazil, you're from an area that's closer to the equator, and Bernardo, you're further away. How does that play on the development, the economic development of Brazil?
Yeah. I'll speak a little bit. Like this, the equator is right there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, where Maria was, this area has a lot of droughts specifically, and then this is a lot of rainforests. Then there's the Amazon. And as you go here, this is where the limit of the tropics. So this is still very warm, but this area lent itself for a lot of the crops that made cycles of money for Brazil. So like sugar cane, and coffee, and cocoa, all these along the coast and into the interior here. So then the way it sets itself up is this originally was kind of like the center where the first cycles of came, and Salvador was the capital, and a lot of slavery was very much based on slavery. So Brazil is sort of a mirror flipped image of the US, and then, so this is our northeast, kind of.
Yeah.
Right? And so, and this is like the south, so Mississippi and socially, economically kind of played out the same way.
Yeah.
And so this became the kind of center, economic center over time, and São Paulo is sort of like the New York City of where stock exchange and things like that happen. And then Rio is the old capital, like Virginia kind of. And so you have these things kind of playing out in that kind of dynamic where there's a lot more poverty as you go north, and there's a lot of prejudice towards people that come from the Northeast. And because of the droughts, there was a lot of immigration, a lot of movement of population towards here, towards Rio and Sao Paulo. And there's a lot of known kind of stereotypes and prejudices from people from here towards people that come from the Northeast.
Sure, to add to what you said, Bernardo, the southern Brazil has a lot of European influence.
German.
Lots of them. And it has a lot to do with the immigrants. They want to go to Brazil, they try harder. And some of them judge themselves superior to the Northeastern, and they are usually light color, that wife of that player, Tom Brady, that
Michelle
Mich-
Bachelet.
yeah, she's of a German descent,
Yeah.
blue-eyed and blonde. And Brazil, like São Paulo, that the southern Brazil has a lot of Japanese. There are area in São Paulo that you think that you are in Japan. There are lots of Korean, lots of Italian in southern Brazil. So it has a lot to do with that too. They went to Brazil, like they went there to work and to have a better life. And it's a different, has a different taste, a different aspect than the Northeast. We are.
You can get a good pizza there.
Yes.
The Northeastern, like Bernardo said, it has droughts and not well developed like southern United States. It just has, the money doesn't go there, it's not there. The good schools are not there. It's not well as the South, as southern Brazil.
Yeah.
Not as well developed.
It's just, and then at the same time, the cultural contribution of the Northeast is huge. It's enormous. The African culture, the way they develop music, and art has a huge influence for Brazilian identity and sense of country.
Comments from you, questions?
When you go back to Brazil to visit, how do you feel?
That's a good question. I feel sad sometimes. I have memories. It's difficult to erase everything from your brain, but I feel fortunate to go there and to help my family. That I am very thankful for that. Fixing the homes, my partner knows their money, to feed them, to go to school, to bury them in death and in life. I am there. And I don't judge myself any different from them. If they're just eating beans on the floor, sitting on the floor, I sit on the floor. I don't actually wear anything nice. I wear nice things because I am here and I have access to it. But when I go to Brazil, I give more than I take. And I feel very fortunate to do that, and I have helped many people. All of them, sending money to school, fix teeth, buying books, and buy homes. Many. So I am happy, but it's also draining, to be honest. It's draining emotionally. Emotionally, it drains me and it drains my pockets too. But I don't go very often, every 5 years or so, but I am happy to go and to give. And now I see it a little bit different as I get older. I see Brazil under a different light. I understand it more than when I was growing up. Of course, I did not understand it growing up. I only understood this much of the whole structure because all my channel was survival. When you do that, you don't see the whole picture. That's why it's so diminished when you are poor. So the world becomes just a little fraction of what you should be. Over here, you have so many possibilities. You can go to the library, check books, you can go to college, you can take a walk, you can drive, you can eat whatever you want. I feel fortunate being here.
Are most or all of your siblings still in Brazil?
They are. Some of them have come here to stay with me. I have helped, especially the girls, my nieces. Some of them have stayed with me and gone to school. Some still live here. But most of them are there. 3 of my brothers have died. My mother has died. But I still have, 2 sisters and 2 brothers.
In Salvador, or did they move?
In Salvador.
I'm interested in tracing from the time you left Brazil to coming into America. Did you come into Tampa? Did you come into New York City? What happened?
Good question. So, I told you that the nuns saw that I like to study, right? And they gave me students, wealthy students, to tutor. And so I would tutor them. And so I lived with one of the families. One summer I went to their farm. They were very wealthy. They had the cocoa plantation in Bahia. So I lived with that family for 3 months, from December, January, and February. When school started in March, I went back to Salvador. So from that family, one member of the family went to Greece, and wealthy. And in Greece, she met an American in the Navy, a captain in the Navy. And of course, they got married. So the family asked me, or recommended that I come to the United States and live with the family in Arlington, Virginia, and take care of 2 children. One was a newborn, and the other was a toddler, 2-year-old. So I stayed there, and I learned English at Northern Virginia Community College at night. And during the day, I worked as an au pair, a living babysitter. I took care of the kids, I cleaned sometimes, and mostly watched them. But that family, the husband was transferred to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. So they couldn't take me. So I went back to Brazil. And in Brazil, I started teaching Portuguese. That's my native tongue. To speakers of other languages. And one of my students was Paul Hogan. And we started dating, and Paul asked me if I wanted to come back to the United States. I said, yes, yes, yes. I want to go to grad school. I want to continue studying. And Paul, being the good person he was, he paid for my whole schooling in St. Cloud State University in Minnesota.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's how I came.
It blows my mind, Maria, the role, your passion for learning really is what carried you across the highway. Right. I just want to get to that image that you shared with me.
You know what that is? Can you think of what that means? Book to birds.
Yeah.
Book to birds.
Your soul.
Dali, Salvador Dali, a Spanish painter. That represents pretty much my journey. Books.
Well, now there's
What is metaphorical about this imagery is that I was by the ocean. Remember I told you that I would cross the little path there with Dona Tidinha, the one who used to feed me a banana and bread. And I was to study on the rocks there, get my book, because I didn't want to stay in that house. And that's what it is. That's what transported me across the ocean. And I thank you for being here, across in your land, across the ocean.
Thank you, Maria, and thank you, Bernardo.
Yes.
Complex experiences, and you guys are so accessible. Thank you.